Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Derek Holt is a former and founding member of the Climax Blues Band, a British blues rock band. The band originated in Stafford, England in 1967 and is still in existence, although with no original members. Two of the original members have passed, Colin Cooper in 2008 and Pete Haycock in 2013. The band's two biggest hits were 1975's Couldn't Get It Right and 1981's I Love You, written and sung by my guest today. You would have to be hiding under a rock for the past 4 decades or so to not have ever heard either song. Derek left the band in 1983. After that, he recorded an album and a trio as Grand Alliance in 1983 and another album with Pete Haycock as H Factor in 1989. And Mr. Holt has also worked with Stewart Copeland and keyboardist Gary Moberley. Derek released a solo album in 1999 entitled I Love You, and in 2021 collaborated with ex-Climax Blues Band member Richard Jones on the album Shadowman. Well, welcome, Derek.
Oh, hi. Nice to be with you.
Thanks again for getting together on such short notice.
Okay, my pleasure.
So let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born, and talk about any fond memories of your childhood?
Well, I was born in 1949, which makes me knocking on a bit, in Stafford in England, that I refer to as Middle Earth, and had a good childhood, good upbringing. My brother, who sadly is no longer with us, but he was 10 years older than me, and he used to play in a band, a skiffle band, basically, which was like an American folk type band, with a washboard and a banjo player and a tea chest bass, and I think called a Jaws harp. And these guys used to sit in the living room, and I was 8 years old, and they used to bash out this music called skiffle.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most famous guys in England that was playing this sort of music was a guy called Lonnie Donegan.
Lonnie Donegan, yes.
And I just love this stuff, you know. And
Rock Island Line.
Rock Island Line, yeah. And so basically, there was always instruments lying about, and I taught myself to play the guitar.
You did, okay.
Yeah, and then of course there were, you know, as years went on, you know, I was starting to get influenced by people like the Shadows, Hank Marvin, who had a beautiful red Stratocaster, and I started playing that stuff, and then basically just started playing with people and formed various bands. Yeah. You know, when I was about 15 to 16, so that's where it started for me.
I've heard how influential Hank Marvin especially was with so many future musicians and fans.
Well, I've seen him quite a few times, and you know, the thing that really got me, the music sounds easy, but it's not. It's not easy to play, and he never made a mistake.
Right.
And I just find that absolutely amazing. Yeah.
I know most fans and musicians prefer the Shadow solo material than that with Cliff Richard.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, do you remember when you were younger, music? Well, you talked about your brother being, in the skiffle band, but do you remember any other music being heard in the household, being played either
on the radio? It was well, there used to be a guy, a guitarist. I can't remember his name now, actually. But Bert Weedon. Bert Weedon, right, was an English guitarist who was a bit of a showman. You know, on the TV he would have this beautiful, like, big Guild or a Gretsch guitar, and he'd say something like, "I'm going to play 1,000 notes a minute. Let's see if you can count them." I was very impressed by that. Of course, when I got to about 75, I lost count. And,
You're right.
but yeah, he was quite an influence. And but you know, then I started listening to people like Little Richard and Chuck Berry and the Kinks, the Beatles, obviously. Pink Floyd became a huge sort of inspiration for me, and Jimi Hendrix, obviously. And I drew from all these people, and you know, then I taught myself piano, and then I taught myself bass guitar, and then I could sing, and so I was able to do quite a number of jobs, you know.
Right.
Which left me in good stead, really, for what was coming up.
That's right. You said so. Guitar was your first instrument you picked up, right?
Yeah.
And then you branched out into those, and it was all self-taught.
Yeah.
Can you remember one of the first concerts or gigs that you attended that you went to?
I remember we had a band in Stafford, and it was called Barry and the Ravens.
Okay.
And Barry was,
I guess, the first band I was in that sort of got any gigs. And this lady, I don't know where she came from. Anyway, she became our sort of manager and provided us with some equipment. And I remember our very first gig was our local nightclub. It was called the Top of the World.
Oh, okay.
And we got £5 for the gig.
Is that right?
She took 4 and gave us £1.
Wow.
And it was hilarious, really. I mean, I'm only about 16 years old, so but it was our first paying gig and our first introduction to management.
what a commission, you know. Woo.
Yeah, there you go. And so that relationship didn't last long.
No, I would say not. Well, you guys learned early on about that.
We certainly paid our dues there. We ended up going around the local club scene of Stoke-on-Trent, which is about 15 miles away from Stafford, and we used to do what used to be called working men's clubs.
Okay.
Where you would play in between the bingo, and you know, you'd probably do 2 45-minute spots, but everybody only went for the bingo. Do you know what the bingo is? Bingo?
Yes.
Lotto, I think they call it.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, that was a learning curve, and we learned how to deal with audiences that didn't want to listen and all that stuff, you know. So it was a good learning curve.
Yeah. All right. So you were you pretty much heavily influenced by the blues early on?
Yeah, I would think most of the stuff that, well, I wouldn't say on radio, but there used to be like underground stations, you know, and most of the stuff, the stuff that was not mainstream would be blues. And as I say, I mentioned Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Bill Haley and the Comets. I don't know whether you're familiar with them, but they were a very old rock and roll band, you know, just playing this rock and roll 12-bar stuff. I mean, it all came from the blues, really. And one of the first Beatles songs I ever remember had a harmonica, and that was played on Saturday morning radio, and that was "Love Me Do."
Right.
Which was like, and the first time I'd ever heard a harmonica played, you know, and then of course you start investigating harmonica players, and then I got into people like Little Walter and you know, Muddy Waters and all these people, and started checking out the blues music, and it was obvious that's where most of the English bands were influenced, you know. People like the Kinks and the Rolling Stones, and to a certain extent the Beatles, you know, and Jimi Hendrix obviously came into my life, and and he blew me away. He was playing. I've never heard anybody play blues like that, And pretty much a good upbringing, really.
Yeah, yeah. A little later, Yardbirds. Of course, Eric Clapton, heavily influenced by blues.
Well, and also, you see, I mentioned Chuck Berry. I actually got to play bass with Chuck Berry further down the line.
Uh-huh.
And that was in Spain, in Barcelona. And talk about a baptism of fire.
Yeah. A friend of mine, I don't know, it was many years ago. He said he saw Chuck Berry in concert and met his daughter, and he said she was really, really sweet. I do remember.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I remember going into Chuck Berry's dressing room saying, "Hi, Chuck. I'm Derek Holt. I'm your bass player for tonight. What songs are you doing?" And he said, "Chuck Berry songs. And knock next time you want to come in."
Did he?
It wasn't a good start.
Interesting. Did you get
brilliant.
did you get to socialize or talk to him any away from the concert?
Not with Chuck, no.
Not with Chuck, okay. Not after that, too. I bet.
Well, the thing is, he got paid. He got paid, and then he went off after 45 minutes, and everybody's screaming and shouting for Johnny Be Good, and he goes off and speaks to the promoter, negotiates another $5,000, and comes back on and does Johnny Be Good,
Yeah.
And I think we all got $50 each for the gig, so he made a killing that night. But that was Chuck, but fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the ins and outs of the
legend.
Part. Yeah. Well, it's another learning experience, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Sure. Well, we'll talk about the genesis of the Climax Blues Band.
Okay.
Originally it was Climax Chicago Blues Band.
Yeah, that's right.
So you were influenced heavily, I would say, I guess, from the Chicago, the bluesmen out of Chicago.
Well, I'll explain. After I left school, I went to work in a laboratory. I was pretty much into chemistry and physics and all that stuff. And the actual company, the factory, made grinding wheels. And I was in the laboratory doing analysis, chemistry analysis. And that's where I met Colin Cooper, because he was a metallurgist.
Oh, okay.
And I knew of Colin because he used to play clarinet in a jazz band, and I used to go and watch this jazz band, Anyway, when I joined the Universal Grinding Wheel Company, that's where I met Colin, and he said, "Do you fancy forming a blues band?" And he knew of this guitarist called Pete Haycock, who lived in the same street as me, but I didn't know him. He went to a different school. It's uncanny.
You never met him before?
I never met him before, but I heard about him because he played with Colin. He was probably 15 or 16 years old. Pete was, and I was 18. So I was 3 years older. Anyway, we decided we would all meet up, and they got a mutual friend, a drummer friend called George Newsom, and another friend called Richard Jones, who was the original bass player. So the band was Colin, Pete, me on rhythm guitar, Richard on bass, and George Newsom, and a keyboard player called Arthur Wood, who Colin knew from Stoke. He was like a boogie woogie pianist, great player. And of course, we started off doing just playing in local bars and clubs, playing Chicago blues. All the stuff that I was talking about earlier, Little Walter and Howling Wolf and Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters and all these people, just called ourselves the Climax Chicago Blues Band. Mm-hmm. And every Sunday we used to run our own blues club in Stoke-on-Trent. It was called the Crown and Anchor in Longton. And every Sunday night we used to pack the place. It was like 10 pence or 10 cents on the door, and it would be rammed. And we just started to get our own following, you know, and the whole thing just took off from there, really.
Yeah, I think a couple of your contemporaries, maybe around the same time, bands that I was heavily into, Savoy Brown,
Savoy Brown, yeah.
yeah, and
Chicken Shack.
Chicken Shack, and early Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, marvelous, Peter Green.
Oh yeah,
What a guy. You know, in fact, he came to Stafford to one of our clubs, our little clubs. The original Fleetwood Mac came.
Yeah.
Peter Green, Danny Kerwin, Jeremy Spencer, Mick Fleetwood, and John McVie played in a local pub for like £20 or something, you know. But yeah, I think Peter Green was one of England's greats.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
great.
Sad. Yeah. Sad what happened anyway, you know. Just but there you are. That's rock and roll.
Yeah, it is. Well, early on, what was one of the strangest gigs that you guys played? This Climax Blues Band. One of the.
Well, I think I could tell you about. I mean, the way we got into touring was we when we were doing this blues club, there was a guy sent up from EMI because they were looking for a blues band to put on a label called Harvest, and this guy came up and he said, "Do you want to come and record? Do you want to come down to London? I mean, we've all got jobs, but he said, do you want to come down to London and come and record an album? We're looking for a blues band." So we all got in the van and drove down to London, and the studio was Abbey Road.
Okay.
For our first album. So the Beatles were in Studio 2 and Pink Floyd were in number 3. So and that was quite an experience. But so we made.
Was that a little intimidating going into Abbey Road?
Well, we were all young kids, you know, really 18, 19 years old. Colin was older. He was 10 years older than me, so he'd have been about 28. I won't say intimidating. It was certainly thrilling. And Paul McCartney walked into the control room and, you know, like this, you know, put his thumbs up, and you think, blimey, you know, pinch yourself, really. So anyway, we did 2 days there, got in the van and drove back and went back to work, thinking nothing more of it. But of course, with that came the opportunity to go down to London and start playing the London clubs. And that's what we did. Even though we still had jobs, we'd still take the time off and travel down, to the point of playing down in London so much. Every time we went back to Stafford to get up for work, we were always in late. We never went to work. So the bosses got a bit unfriendly about that and said, you have to make the choice about staying with the band or you've got to leave. So Colin and I left.
Yeah. Back then, about how long did it take to travel from Stafford to London?
Well, in the olden days, I say the older days, but back in like 1968, it would take in a van 5 or 6 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Just, I mean, it's only 120 miles, but the roads weren't that great, you know.
Yeah.
Before motorways were built, there was a main motorway called the M1, but that didn't start until at least an hour and a half out of Stafford.
Yeah.
I mean, you can drive it now in probably 2.5 hours. So. Yeah.
The wonders of highways, right?
Well, we used to take, you know, flasks of coffee and sandwiches. Just yeah.
To survive the trip. Well,
and a Hammond organ. We used to take a Hammond organ. Can you imagine taking that up the stairs? God.
Oh, wow. That's bulky and heavy. Yeah.
We used the Mellotron. Abbey Road had the Mellotron that did Strawberry Fields Forever. So we got to use that, and
right.
So I've got my T-shirt on, Strawberry Fields Forever, and so that was great. You know,
I've heard how heavy those things are. Ooh, you want to get it in a place and not have to move it.
Yeah, but the technology of that is just like rotating tapes.
Right, right.
Just amazing things.
Yeah, but the sound you got from it.
Oh yeah, unique. Yeah.
Yes, it really was. That eerie, moody quality. Well, a lot of the band's early material is steeped deep in the blues. Tracks like "Looking for My Baby." I like the slide guitar on that one. How often did you guys use the slide guitar on songs?
Well, it became more prominent as it went on. Really, I mean, Pete was not only a great guitarist, but he was a great slide player.
Yeah, and
just a different attitude and a different sound, and obviously it was the sound of the blues because he was into Elmore James and people like that. So even as a young player, he was very gifted in picking it up and learning how to play like that. So, and then the more popular we got, the more we used to feature it, and he was quite a genius on the guitar, really, Pete. Bless him.
Yes. Well, did you ever get any feedback from American blues artists on your material? That they enjoyed
Well,
it?
on our very first tour of America, we arrived in New York, and we did the first gig we did. Believe it or believe it not, was Carnegie Hall.
Is that right?
supporting Albert King and T-Bone Walker. Now, if you think about 5 white English country boys turning up in America, and then the first, baptism of fire, and playing support to these 2 giants of the blues industry. So God knows what they thought of us, but they were all very hospitable and nice to us, so it was great.
Yeah. Well, T-Bone, isn't he a Texas bred guy, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think he's from Texas. Okay.
Yeah. Albert King, he blew me away because not only did he play left-handed, but his strings were upside down as well. So Jimi Hendrix turned a right-handed guitar around, but he had the strings the right way round. But Albert King had the strings the opposite way round, and so his style was unique, and he was fantastic. Albert King, he was a powerhouse, a big man.
So that how many shows did you play just at Carnegie?
Yeah, we just did one show. And then of course we basically got in the van, put the gear in the van, and we started traveling around. We ended up driving around to Long Island and up into Boston, and just gradually started, eating our way through America, and gaining more fans as we went. And then we started to fly, which made traveling a lot easier. Yeah. And then, just basically just toured and did the miles, so, which is the way you had to do it back in those days.
Yeah, well, I think you've always been pretty popular here in the U.S. I think, yeah.
Well,
big following.
Yeah. Plus, the thing is, we had to drop the name Chicago. I always thought, in fact, I always thought the name Climax Blues Band sort of limited our audience, really. We had to drop the Chicago because of the band Chicago Transit Authority.
Right.
So we took that out and became the Climax Blues Band. And then, of course, we started writing our own material and became a little bit more commercial, if you like. I hate to say that word, but the record companies demanded that you write something that can be played on radio. And that's when we started to experiment with more commerciality without really selling out. But I think couldn't get it right as an example of taking the blues a bit further. It still sounds like a blues to me, but it's a bit more poppy.
Right. I think so too. Yeah, a couple of other earlier tracks that more blues oriented that I really enjoyed was "Hey Baby, Everything's Gonna Be All Right,"
Yeah,
and then one of my favorites, "And Lonely."
yeah.
You know, that's like a long track. It doesn't seem that long though. It's not. It's like one of those songs that doesn't seem. What is it? 8 minutes something, but
Yeah, but it's to me that was Abbey Road again, and that particular song, and I still remember it now. We created that atmosphere, which you can hear it on the record. It's a moody thing, and we just got into it. So we captured that vibe perfectly, I think.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, moving forward a little bit to the tightly knit LP. It's got
Mhm.
that iconic album cover.
Yeah, Storm Thorgerson.
Yeah, and I know first time I had to look at it really close. What's that in his mouth? What is that?
Yeah,
But
sock.
yeah.
In fact, the title of that photograph, I can explain that Storm Thorgerson was the guy that produced so many album covers for Pink Floyd,
Right.
Including Dark Side of the Moon. But that particular photograph that he gave us for the album cover was originally called "Put a Sock in It,"
Okay.
and we changed it to "Tightly Knit," which summed up the band really, because we were a tight band.
Yeah, and you knit socks too, so yeah.
We knit socks, yeah. Yeah, merchandise, yeah. Buy your socks here.
Right. Well, one of the tracks that was on off of that one, that's one of my favorites, and I wish it was a longer track, but I can understand why it was a little shorter. Was "That's All." That's always been one of my favorites.
Let me tell you, da, 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 we are with you night and day. That's all.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Yeah.
You know who it reminds me of is the one that did "In the Summertime."
Oh, Mungo Jerry.
Yeah, it sounds like a Mungo Jerry kind of track, doesn't it?
Yeah, I also thought it was a little bit like something that Canned Heat would have done as well.
Right, that's true.
But the thing is about that, the flavour of that as well was there was a flute on it, like a bamboo flute that Colin used to play, and I think the drums were the actual drum cases. They weren't real drums. It was just somebody banging these padded cases, with a microphone on it. So it wasn't. The whole thing was an experiment, and the creativity in the studio,
But it's very catchy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we were after that. As I was saying, you're still playing the blues, but hopefully has some sort of poppy commercial factor as well, which is what every band strives for, I think.
Yeah. Well, you the next year, Rich Man has probably we spoke of this prior to this interview. Probably my all-time favorite CBB song, "Mole on the Dole."
Mole on the Dole, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that. You see, I always found the studio environment a wonderful place to be, and with the onset of stereo happening and recording in headphones, it's a memory that will last with me forever, because when we started layering backing vocals,
Right.
You'd have the lead singer, then you'd put a harmony on it, and then you'd double the harmony, then you put another harmony on and double that. So you ended up having like 12 voices in your headphones. And I remember "Mole on the Dole" being the first time that I ever heard stereo vocals, and that in itself was a studio moment for me. And I've always loved, from that then on, I've always loved harmonies and bands, I thought we nailed that sound as well. "Mole on the Dole," great.
I think so too. How well did the song? How well did it fare with the public?
I don't think. I mean, it probably got a bit of radio airplay, but it didn't set the world on fire, you know. But you know, it's like most things. You keep plugging away, and eventually, hopefully, something will stick.
Yeah,
You just got to persevere.
yeah. Another track off of that album, going back to the blues, more of a blues rocker, "Shake Your Love," and I like the endings. You know, it's like you think it's ending, and then it comes back. You know, another second later, like three times.
Reggae with your jaggy. Mustard and custard are sweet on me. And I tell you who said that. Our producer on that album was Richard Gotterer.
Okay.
And Richard Gotterer was, I think he produced the McCoys' Hang On Sloopy. And he was a great producer. He would get into us so much to become a little bit more experimental, and would allow us to go off on one, you know. And yeah, Richard was quite a famous guy actually. He ran Sire Records with Seymour Stein.
Right.
And that was really our first break. Richman was our first break of records into America because of Sire Records.
Okay.
Seymour Stein became Madonna's manager.
Right. Yeah.
So two famous people, Richard Gotter and Seymour Stein. Yeah. Check that out.
Well, when did Miles Copeland? He became what, manager at some point, right?
Yeah, he did. It's strange how we met. Actually, we were going to play in a club in London called the Marquee, and we were driving around the little streets of Soho, and he was standing on the corner, and he saw us in the van. He said, "Hey guys, I want to manage you guys." In my terrible American accent, sorry. And we said we're playing at the Marquee tonight. And he came to the Marquee and saw us, and yeah, he'd heard about us. He also, on his roster of talent, he had bands like Wishbone Ash, Curved Air, Renaissance, and he said, "Yeah, I want to manage you guys," and he took us on, which was a nice thing, you know, totally before the, you know, any of the police stuff or anything.
Right.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, well, he was the one that kind of pushed you to do a little more commercial sound with couldn't get it right. He was,
well, that was it. We had an album called Gold Plated that we recorded in a studio in England called Chipping Norton, and actually produced by a guy called Mike Vernon, who produced the early Fleetwood Mac. So there's a little sort of thread running there. And we delivered the album Gold Plated to Miles, who was then distributed. It was BTM Records, complicated, BTM Records distributed by RCA. Anyway, the record company said, "We can't really hear anything that we could promote on the radio. Could you go back in the studio and try and write something commercial?" And that's exactly what we did. We went into the studio and wrote Couldn't Get It Right over 2 days. But the thing is, the producer, Mike Vernon, got so annoyed with the fact that we never told him about that song. And we actually said, well, we didn't have it. It wasn't even written. So that song was produced by us ourselves. And the engineer who was on it was a guy called Peter Henderson, a very young engineer in Air London Studios. And he went on to produce Breakfast in America with Supertramp.
Okay.
Yeah, so all these people were around, you know, and off they went, and they furthered their careers. But we were there at the beginning, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah.
nice to have been there at the beginning. I would think too. To see how they grew and developed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I always tell people that people like bands like Squeeze and Dire Straits supported us.
Yeah.
Can you believe? 1978. Thin Lizzy supported us. Quite a lot of bands. The Cars, even, they supported us, and Status Quo even supported us in America, which was quite funny because they were huge in England.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, talk about success story, but Dire Straits was the one that nobody saw that coming.
Nobody saw that coming. No. I remember when
God,
I first heard Sultans of Swing on the radio. I was like, "What is this?" I mean, I liked it, but I was like, and of course, I thought it was an American band right off.
yeah.
But yeah.
Well, when they supported us, they used to set up in front of our equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and that we used to carry a Fender Rhodes piano, and every night I would go and sit on the piano behind Dire Straits and play a couple of songs with them. Water of Love was one that springs to mind, and Mark Knopfler, he used to say, "Thank you, Mr. Piano Man." And I was thinking, how close was that to getting involved with them? That would have been great, because I love their music. I love his playing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Genius.
Yes. Is he still recording? I don't.
Yeah, I think he does it in his own time, obviously. I think he did a lot of stuff with Chet Atkins, which is sublime. Some of that stuff is sublime. But I still revisit things like Romeo and Juliet and all that, and it's just great, clever stuff.
Yeah.
And they were, they supported us. In a way, you could say we helped to launch their career.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask you about any memorable concerts with any support bands or bands that you supported.
I think one of the most I talked about Carnegie Hall. We actually did a gig at Madison Square Garden, which was like probably one of its equivalent to the Albert Hall in London. Yeah. And we did that with Bad Company, and we had a really good following in New York. So really, we gave Bad Company a hard time because people love Climax, which was great. The other stuff, people like Lynyrd Skynyrd, the original Lynyrd Skynyrd, we did many shows with them, and pre their tragic accident, but they were lovely guys, and they treated us well. Yeah. We even got to sing with the girls, "Sweet Home Alabama," on stage with the girls, which was a thrill. And they were great to us. ZZ Top, top of their game. They were nice people. Peter Frampton, even BB King, all these big guys in the business looked after us, and we did really well.
Yeah, I remember Lynyrd Skynyrd. Back when I was younger, they came through Dallas, and for some reason I couldn't go to the concert. It was the next year that they had, the plane crash. So it was like I always, felt bad about that. Like,
well, two of our guys, Pete and Colin, after one gig, they actually were invited on the plane to fly to the next gig.
Is that right? And
they wrote a song. We wrote the song called "Champagne and Rock and Roll," mm-hmm. And you'll recognize this. The opening line is, I went to bed in Houston. They woke me up in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. Is the opening line, and that was for them flying on that plane, the one that eventually dropped out of the sky. So yeah, there you are. Yeah. And Paul, gosh, and the the irony of the album cover as well. Street Survivors, is it?
Yeah, right.
With the flames.
Yeah, with the flames. It is.
Just,
it is. It's eerie, isn't it? Yeah.
God bless them. Yeah.
You know, and throughout the story of the Buddy Holly flight too, and who was it that decided not to get on the plane?
Yeah.
You know, and it's just things like that, you know, that.
Well, we actually missed the plane. We were traveling from Columbus via Chicago to go to Washington, D.C. And it was snowing in Chicago, and we were a bit late. And if we'd have run with our guitars and our bags, we'd have made the plane.
Mm-hmm.
But we decided to catch the next one, which was like an hour later, to Washington. And that plane that we were going to get on crashed. So that was 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know,
thank
you.
Right. Is it like a premonition, or is it just?
Well, we just decided that it was just too much to run to, you know, big airport with all the stuff, you know.
Right.
So and the thing is, it's like catching a bus, you know.
Right.
Flights are regular, so we were only an hour afterwards, but we missed it. We missed that tragedy. Yeah, a few stories like that.
Yeah, and that's something. Yeah. Well, it was meant to be, or meant not to be, whichever way you want to look at it. Well,
Stevie Ray Vaughan is another one, isn't it? He took Eric Clapton's seat in a helicopter.
Yes, right. That's another one.
I loved Stevie Ray Vaughan. My God, he could play.
Yes, he sure could. Wow, I got into him a lot later than a lot of people did, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, you know, when we it might bring us on to the next thing about Grand Alliance. I'll preempt it really, but we actually did some shows with Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble.
Okay.
And to the point of sharing a dressing room with him, you know, and what a guy he was. What a lovely band, you know. Just.
Was he a nice guy? Did you get
he was great with us. Yeah.
Yeah, down to earth. Yeah.
Down to earth, no bullshit.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, I wanted to bring up your most famous track, "I Love You."
Mm-hmm.
And I never imagined when I heard it that it was Climax Blues Band. I thought maybe Paul McCartney, but it wasn't his voice, you know, of course, and with George on guitar.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe they got back together, but you know, I can't make out the vocals. I can't. And then I found out, you know, who it was. And your vocals on that are just great. Did you sing any other songs with the band, or why not?
Well, I was always the guy, you know. I was always the harmonizer. I sang a few things a cappella. Well, not a cappella, but you know, a couple of lead vocals I used to sing. Say, for instance, couldn't get it right. You know, it was a double vocal, and you can hear me in the background singing high vocals and that. But I was always like the singer in waiting, if you like.
Yeah.
That particular song, "I Love You," was pretty much all me, to be honest. Even the guitar solo was mine.
Right.
And it's one of those things. I'll tell you the story of how that come to be. I'd recorded it in my bedroom studio. I got a drum kit and a bass and Fender Rhodes piano, and basically put the song together in a couple of hours with lyrics and everything. Did all the backing vocals, played the guitar solo, and then that was that. And we were due to make an album in LA, and Warner Brothers sent over a producer to come and pre-produce what songs we'd got, knock us into shape before we flew to LA to record. And we had rehearsals at Colin Cooper's house in the country, and we went through all the material, and he said, has anybody got any more songs? And I said, well, I've got this one. It's called I Love You. You know, it's on a cassette. And I said, but nobody else likes it. Nobody likes the song. So I played it to him, and he went, oh, that's great. That sounds like a hit. And off we went to LA to do it. But prior to that, we had a meeting about, I should tell you this because it's the truth. You know, we had the chat about publishing. Up until that point, I would say that Pete and Colin probably were 60% songwriters, and I was like 30% songwriter, and John Cuffley, the drummer, threw his ideas in. But what happened was the band as a group made the songs work. So whoever wrote the songs, the band worked out and made them work. So that's where I was coming from. Anyway, we had a meeting about publishing, and Pete and Colin said, whoever writes a song, they're gonna have the publishing. And I said, well, we've been together this long, you know, the four of us have always shared it, because we all work it out and we make the song the best we can because of the four people. And I lost the argument, you see, so we ended up splitting the publishing individually. And what did I do? I write I Love You. And that became a hit, which really upset the other guys in the band. So so there you are. I mean, the thing is that even when we recorded it, Colin's not even on the track. The track was me, Nicky Hopkins, who was a keyboard player with famous keyboard player. Oh yeah, he was on Imagine and played with the Stones and people like that. So to cut the basic track, it was me, Nicky, and John Cuffley, the drummer. Put down the basic track, and then I put the bass guitar on and sang it. Did all the backing vocals. Then I got Pete to play my solo, which was on the demo, and that solo was a tune, as you say, like George Harrison. It was meant to be that solo, and he reluctantly played it, but he played what I wanted him to play, and then it became a hit. And then John Ryan put some strings on it, and it became a hit. And it was I won't say the worst thing that happened, but it certainly was the catalyst for the fallout. And they cancelled a tour. You know, we had a US tour booked, and they cancelled it because they didn't want to go and promote my career, basically. So I had to go.
Wow, I can.
Yeah, it's very sad
about that. Yeah, I mean, you hear about that struggles within a band, and
yeah, but you know, had it been somebody else, had it been Pete, say, had written "I Love You," I'd have said to him, "Have you got any more songs like that?" Right. You know, we've got another hit. Let's have some more hits. Come on. Yeah. But no, it didn't work out. Egos got the better of them, and it's sad. It was sad, and it was the beginning of the end, really. Yeah.
So you would say he was probably more wanted to stay with the blues sound.
Well, the thing is that everybody was writing love songs. I mean, I can't understand why they kept saying, you know, he started writing all this schmaltzy stuff. But we were all right. You know, Colin wrote a song called, you know, what was it called? Gotta Have More Love, you know. And Pete was writing Nothing But Starlight, and you know, great songs, but I Love You was the one that just, you know, reared its head. It was a bit like the thing, you know, George Harrison and the Beatles. You know, he wasn't allowed to sing anything or do anything.
Very true.
Until they said, okay, George, you can have one song, and he wrote something.
Wonderful fact. Yeah, you're right. You're right. That
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that well, in other bands that they don't let everybody shine, equally, but especially in your case because of your vocals.
Well, I never got to sing it live in America. I never got to sing it.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I feel a bit cheated, really. But they made it a bit unbearable. It was definitely we're not playing that song.
Right.
We're not going to promote that song. So Warner Brothers, obviously the record company, saying, "Well, we can't promote it if you don't go out and tour. We can't help you promote it." It became a hit off its own back, really, with very little help from the record company.
Very little promotion.
Well, it was never released anywhere else in the world either. So, we missed out hugely.
Yeah, I would say so. And that you weren't allowed to sing earlier on too. I mean, throughout the whole band's career, I think.
Well, I wouldn't say I wasn't allowed. It was just that, I always felt my position, even though I did sing a couple of things, I always felt that I was better off doing the backing vocals and laying down the bass, and I felt very comfortable doing that. I'd rather those people that are up the front.
Yeah.
I'll be behind you playing the bass, and I'll be backing you up with the vocals, and that's how I felt it. My well, I won't say role, but I felt comfortable doing that.
Being in that position. Yeah.
But then I get the opportunity to sing a song, and bloody hell.
well, it's lasted. I mean, that's a sign of a quality track. Is it still popular today? And I'm sure it's still being played on, various radio stations and whatnot. But yeah,
I think it's fantastic. And as I say, the only sad, bittersweet thing is that I never got to actually stand in a stadium and sing the song.
right.
An opportunity missed. God, I mean, I always think bands strive all their lives to have hit records.
Yeah.
Some make it and some don't, and we had a second bite of the cherry. And we just didn't know. I don't know. We needed our heads banging together, really.
Right. Well, I even think on your 1999 album, the newer version of "I Love You," your voice is still in fine shape there too.
Yeah, my voice is still there. Yeah, I still got it. When I was
See?
Gifted.
Right. Well, talk a little bit about Grand Alliance.
Well, when I sort of, I was probably pushed rather than decided to leave. But when I left the band, Miles Copeland, he had an idea to put me together with Roy O'Brien, who was the lead guitarist of Nectar, who were a German band, but he was English.
Yeah.
And he basically put us together. Roy flew over from New York and came to stay with me for about 3 or 4 months in my house. And we wrote some songs. And it was Miles's idea to have a powerhouse trio, almost like Another Police, if you like. Yeah. Which I think was quite a tall order, but we could both sing, and we had a great drummer in Brendan Day, and off we went. We did an album, and we went to America a couple of times. But it was like starting again. I mean, you can say Derek Holt, ex-Climax Blues Band, Roy Albright, ex-Nectar, and sitting in a van touring around America. We did have some good support slots like ZZ Top, who we knew their promoter, and he got us on some support dates with them. But it's honestly starting again, and it became very difficult, and so consequently it was almost like, what's the point?
Okay. Right.
And so that filtered out, fizzled out really. I mean, it was a good couple of years, but I realised that you can't go and, you're either the Climax Blues Band or you're not.
Right.
And that's, so that was like chasing a dream, which was a shame.
Yeah. You had what, the one release with Grand Alliance?
Yeah, we had one album.
Yeah.
In fact, we had enough material for another album, but I think we were on A&M Records. So same thing again, it's all about promotion and marketing and touring and all the machinery. It's all about getting all those things in place. But we ended up just turning up and hopping onto somebody's tour. Nobody's ever heard of Grand Alliance. Who are you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I used to be with Climax Blues Band. Oh, great. Oh, yeah.
Speaking
Why
of,
why don't you play I Love You then?
right. Speaking of A&M, I watched a documentary. Well, it's an older one, but of Herb Albert, and how he got started, and forming the A&M label, and the huge studio that they had there. It was the Charlie Chaplin, actually, had made some movies there. But it was real interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Herb Albert. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, he was
I
one of
think
my early.
I think he was still there when we joined,
Okay.
although we never met him, But yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. A&M.
Yes. Yes. Well, talk about, was it fun working with Miles's brother, Stewart, on that Star Wars animation series?
Yeah. Well, I'd known Stewart a long time because when we used to play in London, Miles had a house in St. John's Wood, and the band Climax would always go and stay there if we had to stay overnight, and he would let us stay, and it was great. And Stewart would have been a 12-year-old boy back then, and he was bashing out drums in a cellar, and so we always remained, pretty good friends throughout his career and our career. And then of course he was with a band called Curved Air, so we ended up touring together. And the Police, obviously. I mean, the Police was the big thing, but he had a studio near a town called High Wycombe in England. And I got a call one day. Basically, I'd sent some demos to who was then, I won't say manager, but he was a guy that knew everybody in my life. And he said, Stuart's doing some music. Send your cassette. So anyway, I sent my cassette of my demos, and there was one song it was called Falling in Love. So anyway, so he liked the song Falling in Love. So he asked me to go down there. And basically what he was doing, he was writing music for Lucasfilms, but it was a cartoon spin-off of Ewoks and droids that were like in Star Wars, characters and that. But so it was an animated thing. And he liked Falling in Love. So we started knocking that into shape. He brilliant with he used to use computers and a Fairlight, old technology Fairlight, and he used to write the music for Equalizer and all that, which was a huge series. Anyway, we knocked this thing into shape, and it became Trouble Again. Instead of Falling in Love, it became Trouble Again, and that's the opening song to the series Ewoks and Droids. So that's me singing it.
You sing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and then we did a song called Love Lessons, which I was singing with him, and he was great to work with. Very positive guy. I love Stewart. Great.
Yeah, I wondered about when the Police formed. They had that kind of with his drumming. It was kind of that reggae kind of beat to it. And was that something he had developed, his input, or was that something Sting and
Well, I
Andy?
think I think technically, you see, it's he was also very clever with echo machines, repeat echo.
Yeah.
He could say play one tap on a hi-hat and it would go ta, 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 ta. So he had a cross polyrhythms going. And I mean, it was probably reggae based, but phenomenal power. And he plays, I mean, I don't know much about drumming, but I know he plays with an orthodox hand grip on a stick instead of holding it like a club.
Yeah.
You hold it in your palm, and he's able to get this incredible whip on the snare. I mean, any drummers out there listening to me will know what I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to talk about. And from that leads me on. Did anybody know that Ringo Starr was left-handed on a right-handed kit? There you go.
Oh, that's a good one.
There's a bit of information on your quiz night. Yeah,
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, that's why his fills are so interesting, because as a left-handed drummer, to play his fills, he has to start with his left hand, whereas a right-handed drummer would start with his right hand. I think. Right. Anyway, a bit of trivia.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of unfound criticism of Ringo. I think ultimately he was a talented drummer.
I think he was the right guy for the band. So
right.
He made it work.
Yeah, it's what they needed. We'll talk. In 1989, you reunited with Pete Haycock and H Factor. How was that experience?
Yeah, that was great. With Steve Hunter as well. That who was one of the lead guitarists with Alice Cooper and Lou Reed, and he was also on a show that we did called Night of the Guitars, where I was the bass player. I shared the bass playing duties with a guy called Livingston Brown. We had a drummer, and I was doubling on bass and keyboards and singing. But the guitarists on Night of the Guitars tour was Steve Hunter, people like Alvin Lee, Jan Ackerman, Robbie Krieger, the guitarist from The Doors, Phil Manzanera, the two guitarists from Wishbone Ash, Andy Powell and Ted Turner, and Randy California, who was in Spirit. So this was like a traveling circus of a tour.
Right.
And of course, Pete and Steve and I got on well, and Miles Copeland thought, what a great idea to put us together and call it the H Factor. Holt, Haycock, Hunter.
Got it.
Or Haycock, Holt, Hunter, or whichever way you want to call it. And we produced an album. The album was basically, we were asked to do the soundtrack for a film called The Wedding Band, which was a bunch of songs that were on Miles's label, cleverly. And I Love You being one of them. And so we formed this thing and did a few gigs. It never really took off either. We went to LA to try and set the world alight, but that just all fell apart. Pete was doing something else. Steve Hunter was doing something else, and I was not doing a lot really. But anyway, it was a nice experience. Recording was great. Steve Hunter is a very, very clever guitarist and a nice guy.
And a genuine guy. Okay.
Yeah. And then Pete,
around?
you see, I mean, no, yeah, he's still around. He's living in Spain, apparently. Pete went on to, what did he do? He went on to, I think, join ELO 2. He did a stint with them.
Right.
And then he did some work with Hans Zimmer, which, Thelma and Louise and K2, playing with Hans Zimmer. Pete was one of Hans Zimmer's favorite slide guitarists, and it's like going back full circle. So, and then sadly, see, Pete sadly passed away very young, 63, I think he was. Yeah. But yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
Sad.
That was young. Yeah. We'll talk
Anyway,
about,
cheer up.
Yeah. You, how did you and mention briefly before the interview, Gary Moberley, but how did you and keyboardist Gary Moberley get together?
Well, because of the producer John Ryan, he was producing a guy called Jonathan Gregg, Irish singer, down in the studio Ridge Farm in Surrey, and I got the call to come and play some bass guitar and do some backing vocals because John knew me, and although I didn't know Jonathan Gregg. And the guy that was down there programming the Fairlight was Gary Moberley.
Okay.
I'd never met him before, but an Australian living in London, and very clever, very clever guy. And we did this album, and I'm not sure what happened with it, but I think it was a record company paid for the album, but I don't think anything happened with Jonathan's career after that. In fact, I spoke to him not so long ago. It was his 70th birthday, and I surprised him with a phone call, but I don't think anything happened. He's one of those guys that should have made it, but was close. Anyway, with Gary, we struck up a relationship, and he told me about doing like library music, basically music that goes on the shelf in a TV studio or something, and if they want to pick something for travel or holidays, you write a piece of music that might be suitable for that. So we did that. We actually did 2 albums together for a company called Colin, just basically instrumentals, but it was something I'd never even considered or thought about. But basically it's film music, short pieces of film music, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, that can be used for any application really, and that was a good experience.
Yeah, I think I like a lot of that library music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of my earlier interviews was with John Cameron. Are you familiar with John Cameron?
John, who's that?
He was big in the library music genre. He
right.
Quite a few, and there was a track, Half Forgotten Daydream, that's on the Nacho Libre movie with Jack Black.
Oh yes,
there's a track on that that's so beautiful, and I posted it on my other YouTube channel where I just post different songs from artists, musicians, and it's got the most views of any song. It's like, it really speaks to people, and it's that real easygoing, early 70s vibe, and it's easy listening, I guess you could call it. But a lot of that stuff is really good. A lot of that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's all about the melody and the atmosphere, and that's why I love doing it.
Yeah.
It's a thrill, you start with nothing and then hopefully end up with a nice piece of music at the end of just work it out.
Yeah. Well, over the years, did you prefer composing, writing music, or performing live, would you say?
I've always loved performing live, and I've always loved the creative process. I think the sad thing about live performance now, I'd love to go out and play, and because I'm good at what I do. I know, I can do it. I can still sing. I can play bass, piano, or guitar. I'm pretty good on all 3 really, but it's very difficult to get anybody interested these days. I tried it a couple of years ago. I went to Seattle and tried to put another Climax Blues together, because there's a Climax Blues Band currently out there with no original members. And I wanted to celebrate the band's 50th anniversary. So I went to Seattle, and there's a guy there put a band together around me, which included Tony Coleman, who was the drummer with B.B. King for 30 years, guitarist called Rick Knotts, who's quite famous in Seattle, Lynn Sorensen, who was the bass player with Bad Company, and Mike Marinig, sax player, keyboard player. So we put this band together in the hope of going to do some shows. And in fact, we did about half a dozen shows around Seattle and Montana. But it was evident then it's so difficult to get anybody interested, and you know, you expect things to happen quickly, but to even get promoters interested, remotely interested in you, even though you've got the pedigree and the you know, the hits, if you like, hard work. So that's one thing that I think, you know, about the business that I don't like. You've got to have a good agent, a good promoter, and a good manager, and you've got to have all the marketing together and product, you know. So in a way, I'm sort of a little bit disappointed in the fact that even having had hit records, I still nobody gives a toss. Pardon my language. But writing music, I write for my own pleasure. That's the same thing as well, you know. Whatever you write today, people can stream it, you know. There's no money in it. Not that I'm saying, you know, not that I'm pleading poverty or anything, but I still think it's sad that you can have 1 million streams and make $10, you know, for all that creative effort. It's sad.
Yeah, speaking of Spotify, yeah, I know it is sad.
But it shouldn't, you know. I mean, it doesn't put me off still being creative. I mean, I still do it for the love of it, for the love of the art, and you know, and I still come up with some pretty good stuff, in my opinion. Whether anybody hears it or not is something else. But you know, I'll never stop being creative because I just love it.
Well, it's who you are. It's your essence. It's
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Any musician that has to do that. It's got to, I think. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about. It's really. I mean, it would be nice to earn some money out of it, but it's not about the money for me. In fact, Miles once said, quote Miles, he said, "It's not about the money, it's about the money."
I like that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it tickled me. Yeah, it's not about the money; it's about the money.
With the emphasis, right? Right. Well, speaking of that solo album from 1999, I Love You. Nice updated versions of that track, and Couldn't Get It Right is also on there, an updated version.
Yeah, I've got another 5 solo albums, by the way.
Okay. All right. Alrighty.
I suppose I may as well plug them here, but
yeah.
I in fact, I can give you the titles and people can find them. I mean, you know, I Love You. It's called After the Climax, was the first album.
Right.
After the Climax, which is a double entendre, I guess. The second one was called Sunflowers. Mm-hmm. The third one was called Here and Now, HEAR and Now.
Like
the fourth one, January Child. The fifth one, Paradise Lost. And the sixth one, It Is What It Is. And it's all, you know, self-penned stuff. And it's, I honestly think there's some good tunes on there, you know. So maybe somebody can go out there and check it out, have a listen. You know, it would be, you know, it'd be nice that people start to listen to some stuff. I haven't got anybody helping me do it, so hopefully, you know, you can spread the word a little bit for me.
Oh, that's what this is about as well.
Hmm.
Have you, other than in Spain, have you played any gigs around?
Yeah, I'm lucky in where I am. I'm in a place called Port de Palenza, which is in Mallorca, and it's a tourist resort. In the winter, everything closes, so that there's nothing going on really. But we're at the start of the season now, and I'll be playing. For instance, yesterday I played bass with a trio, which contains a local guitarist called Guillermo. Are you there? Yeah, called Guillermo, and a great drummer. And we did our local yacht club yesterday, playing rock and roll, and few, couldn't get it right, and I love you and that. And then tomorrow I'm playing on my own, just on a terrace in a bar, and just basically enjoying it really in the sunshine. So no pressure. Keeps me going.
Well, that's the upside of not having a label or a manager, producer that puts that pressure on you and says, we need product, we need it.
Yeah.
So at least you can work at your own pace.
Well, yeah, that's right. I still get as much enjoyment out of doing this, doing what I'm doing now than I ever did, really, because I haven't got to travel very far for a start. So,
right.
Yeah. My phone, I'm going to need to charge my phone up. Are we getting any close to?
Yeah, we're getting really close. I had one more.
Yeah, go on then.
Okay.
I'm hoping it lasts.
Okay. Yeah, just one more question. I wanted to ask you about you and Richard Jones getting together for Shadowman, and how was it like working with him again?
Well, fantastic, really. The thing is, with Richard, he left the band, the early original band, to go to university. Then after he gained his degree in English literature, he came back and rejoined the band, and that's when we recorded "Couldn't Get It Right" around about '76. Then he left again, and then we became a four-piece, and he ended up in London, and he plays an accordion in a band, and he's got various outlets for his music. But during lockdown a couple of years ago, whenever it was, 2020, he just rang me up and said, "What are you doing? Do you fancy putting an album together?" And basically we had a song for Climax, which was never used, called Shadowman.
Okay.
So we reinvented that, and via the internet we were able to work by sharing files, and we came up with this whole album, and so that's a nice piece of work, Shadowman. So you can do it from. I have my little studio in my bedroom. As long as you've got internet, you can work anywhere in the world.
Right. That's been a I think the whole lockdown too was kind of a blessing in disguise for writers, for songwriters, and
Well, yeah, it kept me going.
Yeah, exactly.
It kept me interested, and it kept me sane, really. God.
Right.
I mean, where we are here in Spain as well. I mean, we had a situation where you couldn't even leave the apartment or the house, unless it was in an emergency, because the police are pretty tough here. I mean, you treat them with respect, like anywhere, but you literally couldn't. You had a certain time when you could go and walk around the block,
right,
and then you had to be in. So music for me saved me.
Exactly. It was, well, the population there in UK is more dense, so yeah, they had to have those kind of restrictions. But here, we weren't as strict because we're a lot more spread out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was tough time, but we got through it.
Yeah.
It caused, tourism in Spain. It was disastrous.
Right.
Because nobody could travel here, and businesses went out of business because no people.
No people. Is that picking up again though?
Oh yeah, it's starting to get busy now, which is great.
Great.
And I'm looking forward to the season and knocking out a few tunes.
Well, we'll keep tracks on you, and you know, keep checking back with you, and try to keep in touch. You know.
Yeah, well, you have my email,
Yes, I do.
and maybe email me your phone and stuff,
Okay.
and yeah, we'll stay in touch. It's great to talk to you, and I hope people enjoy the interview.
I'm sure they will. And I appreciate it, Derek, your time, and again, getting together on such short notice. I appreciate
Well,
that.
thanks for reaching out, and I've
Oh, yeah.
enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah. All righty. Well, best of luck to you, and all that comes your way, and um, be safe, and take care. All right.
You too. Enjoy.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Derek.
All the best.
All right. All the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, bye-bye.